Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to the museum on this summer evening in July. I'm David Rubin, the Brown Foundation Curator of Contemporary Art here at SAMA, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to, I think this is the third or fourth season now of our July Conversations, and I'm so honored to have with us Susan Budge tonight. Susan, welcome.
Thank you.
The Conversations series is usually tied to either the collection or an exhibition on view. And of course, if you haven't been up to the second floor, Contemporary Galleries, the sculpture you see on the screen is beautifully on view there. And I hope that you'll visit it after the conversation if you haven't seen it there before. A couple things before we begin. If you would please turn off cell phones if you haven't done that already. I want to thank the sponsors of tonight's program, the San Antonio Office of Cultural Affairs and SAMA Contemporaries, who made tonight's evening possible. And I want to mention a few upcoming events. Next week at 6:15, we'll have a reception, and at 7, the screening of the motion picture Tommy, the psychedelic classic, which we're showing in conjunction with the psychedelic exhibition. It's that great film of the rock opera by The Who, by the filmmaker Ken Russell. If you've never seen it, come see it for the first time. If you've seen it before, come groove and watch Tina Turner as the Acid Queen. Mm-hmm. And then on July 20th, 2 weeks from tonight, I'll be conducting another artist conversation with another artist in our collection, Angel Rodriguez Diaz. And following that conversation, we're doing a special fundraising dinner with Angel at our new Café des Artistes. And it's a fabulous menu that is going to be very sumptuous. Please contact me by email or telephone. My information's on the website if you'd like to join us for that evening. And then finally, on August 3rd, I will be giving a Curator's Choice talk, which are these 20-minute talks that we do at around 6 p.m. on Tuesday nights on works in the collection. And I'll be talking about how two artists in the collection construct narrative. And that discussion will revolve around works by Faith Ringgold and Arnold Mesches, which are also hanging on the second floor in the Contemporary Gallery. So I hope you'll join us for all those events. Be sure to refer to our website or our Facebook page for more details. Okay, so let's begin. Susan Budge, welcome. You were born in Midland, Texas, and we have some images from your past to talk about your childhood growing up in Texas. What's Midland, Texas like? What was it like to grow up there?
Well, we were only there for a couple of years. We moved all around West Texas, Midland, Odessa, Monahans, Crane, then Corpus Christi, Carlsbad, Albuquerque.
How is it that your family moved around so much?
My dad was a geologist, so he started out working in the oil field and then minerals exploration in New Mexico.
Did you have any interest in that as a child yourself?
Oh, yeah. He taught us all about geology on every vacation that we went on, all the rock formations. And
Do you still remember any of that stuff? Fabulous. Okay, tell us about the photos. This kind of takes you into your high school years, right? Mm-hmm. So where were you going to high school?
In Albuquerque, New Mexico.
New Mexico. How long did you live there?
We were there from 1970 to 77.
And during your childhood, were you making art at all? Did you show any artistic inclination?
I started working with clay, digging clay from the side of my grandparents' pond in Palestine, Texas, when I was about 5.
Okay, and did you get familial support for your artistic
Yes, my
inclinations?
grandfather was a landscape painter, so art was encouraged in the family.
Okay. And then let's see here. You... well, let's look at some of your work before we talk about your BFA. In fact, we'll go right to your BFA because we have an installation view. Tell us about what you were studying, who you studied with, and what the body of work was that we're looking at that constituted your bachelor's degree.
In the picture at the top is me with Vern Funk and Don Bendel. Vern Funk was my ceramics teacher at Texas Tech, he and Sarah Waters. And Vern took us to workshops where I met Peter Volkus and Paul Soldner and Rudy Audio, who also influenced the work. So the work in my BFA show was all done in a period of, I think, 3 to 4 months. And the pieces were really precarious, really small at the bottom and large at the top, so they were just delicately balanced. I didn't have any support mechanism inside of them.
Could you tell us a little bit about the...
And people set their cocktails on top of them during the reception.
Those people in Lubbock. Could you tell us a little bit of, there's a lot of drinking there, right? Tell us a little bit, though, about the process. You know, not everyone probably knows about the technique of how you actually make a ceramic sculpture like that.
I do primarily slab construction, where I roll out sheets of clay and then build the forms up in layers like you would do with coil building, only I have larger layers that I work with. And then the pieces on the wall were tubular wall pieces that I would roll out big slabs and then roll them around newspaper forms.
And did you see those forms as pure abstraction, or did they have any metaphoric meaning for you?
They started to take on a figurative reference, particularly like women's, from the ankles to the thighs,
Okay.
the legs. That was the main part for this show.
Okay. Was there feminist art history or anything in the air at the time? I mean, were you being exposed to some of those ideas?
I was really interested in the abstraction and taking information from the subconscious.
Uh-huh.
And so I would go and work in the studio fast and spontaneously and then try to figure out where the work came from. So the first tubular wall pieces that I did, it wasn't until after I went back to New Mexico from Tech on a holiday that I saw that the tubular wall pieces looked like the aspen trees in the mountains.
Ah.
So it was referencing forms.
And
in
you still
nature.
work that way today, spontaneously.
Mm-hmm.
You're working primarily with shape and form, and then as it evolves, you begin to understand what it means, right?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. All right. Now, it wasn't easy for you as an artist to support yourself, so tell us how you earned your living in those early years.
After I had 4 different majors before I finally
What were those? What
broke
were the
down
majors?
and was an art major. But I took ceramics every semester as a reward to myself for going to school. So
It's funny because I did the same thing with art history.
You
Look
did?
where I am now, yeah. So tell us what the other subjects were.
First was fashion design and merchandising, but that was in the home ec department. And I found out that most of the women in the home ec department at Texas Tech were going for an MRS degree. So I didn't last very long in the home ec department.
An MRS degree.
And then I
Okay.
went into graphic design, but I wasn't really interested in graphic design. So then I thought I'd get a degree where I could get a job. So I went into business and marketing.
Okay.
And I was a senior marketing major when I finally broke down and changed my major to art. I was already in advanced ceramics.
So when you got your BFA, and then did you leave Lubbock at that point?
I left Lubbock and went to Dallas and looked for a job to support my art career. I knew that I would keep making art. I didn't think I wanted to teach. I thought I was going to figure out a way to support my art career another way.
So how did you end up flying the friendly skies?
Well, I started out managing a clothing store, and that was working 60 to 70 hours a week, and that didn't leave me much time to work in the studio. And then I worked selling bold listings for the white pages for Southwestern Bell, and the same thing. That was 40 hours a week, so it was very little time. And then the flight attendant job worked out well because I could work 3 days a week and have 4 days off to work in the studio. So even though I didn't like flying all the time, being out of town all the time, at least when I was home, I had concentrated time in the studio.
And you did that for a few years.
So when I got the job as a flight attendant, I transferred to Houston and started working on my master's at University of Houston Clear Lake while I was flying.
Aha. Did you get that degree then?
Mm-hmm. I got an MA at University of Houston Clear Lake.
And was that also in ceramics?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So is this while you were studying there?
This was when I first started at University of Houston Clear Lake.
Okay. And how did you start moving into sort of dealing with the cacti imagery? Was it all around you in your environment?
I think it was reminiscent of New Mexico again.
Let's look at some other examples. Okay, you want to tell us about these works and what they ended up meaning for you once you finished them?
I think that at the time that I was making these pieces, I wanted people to stay away. I didn't want to get involved in a close relationship at that time.
Do you feel that, I mean, this seems to be a recurring thing with you, that very often your sculpture seems to reflect what you're going on emotionally in your life?
Pretty much, most of the time.
Okay, and again, you just started with abstract shapes and they evolved. But then once you've made your first cactus, you make more of them. So I assume at a certain point you're sort of consciously making images of cacti at this point.
Oh, yeah, it was a conscious decision. And whenever I would start on a series of work, on a body of work, I would develop a whole series. And then when the series would be over would be when it would take too long to finish a piece, and I would realize I was getting bored with it and had to change direction.
And tell us about the process for this particular series, how you made them.
It was the same slab construction, building up layers, and then for the cactus thorns, I would poke holes from the inside out and then poke the spines through, and it was ripping the clay, which Peter Volkas did so much.
Yes.
And then the punctured lady, those spikes are about 3 feet long, so I had to make multiple extra spikes in anticipation of some of those
do they
getting
break
broken.
easily?
Yeah, they break real easy.
So did you have a problem with that?
No,
No.
they survived pretty well.
They're
But I had
all
extras.
they're all still.
I have no idea where that piece is now.
Really? Okay. And then how about this one? It's hard for me to read the title from here, but can you?
Oh, it's just a pull. I don't remember the titles on these either. I was tired of having pieces that had flat bottoms, so I wanted to suspend the pieces.
It's looking very biomorphic here. Did you have a sort of an inclination or a tendency to like surrealist biomorphic work?
Absolutely, and I think that the artists whose work I like the most, the influences would show up in my work. And looking back over all this work, I see that there are recurring themes that happen still.
Now, in looking at this one, Flying Dreams for the...
Flying Dreams and the Demon in Me.
And the Demon in Me. One question that occurred to me when I was looking at this, of course, is whether Flying Dreams and the title had anything to do with your working as a flight attendant.
Yes, it had to do with, I used to dream that I would fall out of the airplane.
Really?
And in one of the dreams where I fell out of the airplane, I hit the ground, which supposedly if you dream that you fall and hit the ground, you're going to die. But I didn't die. I just fell in the bushes, and then all these rats came out and started biting my ankles.
And that inspired this sculpture?
I think I was tired of being a flight attendant.
But at least you weren't bored with it. Is that the first time that a dream actually influenced your work?
Probably not. I hadn't really thought about it, but I think I've always been interested in Jung and dream analysis. So
do you record your dreams? Do you make notes about them?
I do when they're traumatic, and when I have recurring dreams. So I've had lots of flying dreams.
Wow. So were you still working as a flight attendant?
I was still working as a flight attendant. So the flying dreams with me falling out of the airplane is on the other side of this piece, and then the demon in me is me when I was having PMS, which would wreak havoc in my romantic life.
Now, on this one, of course, this is sort of the beginning of a more narrative direction in your work. Had you ever actually painted figurative imagery on your ceramics before this?
I think this was the first time
to
start.
What impelled you all of a sudden to kind of start to put a narrative on the exterior of what had been pretty pristine surfaces?
I think it was the traumatic nature of the dreams that I was having that I needed to get
So
out
stress
on the
can
forms.
actually be a positive thing from a creative standpoint.
And when my life gets too stressful is when I return to the narrative and use imagery and text.
So, okay. And this one also deals with flying, changing directions, or deals
Changing
with,
directions
yeah.
is when I started to get more calm, and it was right before I quit flying. So I was getting more confident in my work. I think I had finished my master's at University of Houston Clear Lake, and I was starting to get some recognition for my work and win some awards, and I was calmer. So I was exploring this this cutting element in the work. So there's still a slight figurative reference to this form. I saw it as a woman wrapped in a blanket, and then I was doing the cutting to open the forms.
Now, are there two different textures there?
There's several.
Several
There's
textures?
smooth textures, and then there's color that's painted on and scratched through for sgraffito. And then the form, I would close in the form completely and then cut it to open it up.
So it's almost like assembling something from discrete parts, and like interlocking parts of a puzzle almost.
And
Now,
then
this was the only picture you had of this body of work, is that right?
this was after the airline went out of business, and I applied.
What airline was it?
It was Musair. It was the first non-smoking airline. I smoked in the cockpit. They just opened the windows. No. When the airline went out of business, I applied for other airline jobs because I'd gotten used to the lifestyle and it was working for me to work in the studio. But at the same time, I was shipping work to galleries in California and New Mexico, and I realized I didn't want to be a flight attendant anymore. As I was packing up my apartment to go to training for Delta and packing work to ship to these different galleries, I was crying the whole time. I didn't have to go to a counselor to figure out I didn't want to fly anymore. So I called Delta and said, thanks for the job offer, but I'm going to try to make my career as an artist. And then I went and got a waitress job. So I was waiting tables at a restaurant in Kemah, and I had to wear this really skimpy costume, a little short shorts and the little top that tied in the front. And I tried on the size uniform that I thought would fit me, and the manager said, no, you need a size smaller. And so I was wearing this degrading outfit and not making any money and being sexually harassed by my boss. And so a friend of mine who's an accountant was doing the books for Rick's Cabaret, and she said, you need to go, if you're going to wait tables with your master's degree, you need to make money at it. And the girls at Rick's can wait tables and make a lot of money in the day, and you can handle the businessmen just like you did on the airplane. So I went to work at Rick's Cabaret, and so then I had to start doing the narrative again because it was such a weird environment. So the piece on the left
Yeah, they
is
see what we see.
support system
Yeah.
in Fantasyland. You can see that the waitresses are all balanced on the heads of the
Is this kind of like
of
a
the
seedy
dancers.
bar environment or something? Where
A
you were
topless bar.
working? Okay.
So the dancers, the waitresses were supported by the dancers and by the customers in the bar. But at this job, all my skin was covered. I was not wearing a degrading outfit. I was not sexually harassed by my boss. I had good hours.
So you had
I
to
made a lot
go
of
to
money.
a topless bar to escape being sexually harassed.
So I did that off and on for a year, and during that time I also got my first artist in residence grants from the Texas Commission on the Arts, which is when I discovered how much I loved teaching. And then, but the narrative went from that support system in Fantasyland to all these other pieces, like the abstract piece on the other side has the fishnet stockings. It was part of our uniform for the cocktail waitresses. And then the piece in the background is incorporating text. It talks about deception and lies and has these figures with words coming out of their mouths of like, I will take you to the moon, I will make you a star. And then up above it says, what a tangled web we weave when we practice to deceive. Then the piece, I just noticed the piece on the right with the opening with the flowers in it is really, I'm doing work right now that's referring back to that form. that has the opening in the center.
Right, right. And we saw also in some of the earlier works, you had this sort of hollow center. What would the meaning in that be, leaving the center sort of open and hollow?
Well, it's
Or is it just open-ended in general?
well, yeah.
Let one's imagination roam. Okay. And then now we're going more into your narrative body of work. These seem rather Picasso-esque. Are you a Picasso fan?
I like his work, and I'm sure it influenced me. Also, there were other German abstract expressionist painters that were influencing me during this time.
Yes.
This is the Falling Angels series. So the piece on the left is one of the fallen angels, and then the devil's dancing. And it seemed like every time I turned on the news, the devils were there was so much bad things happening in the world that I thought the angels must be falling and weeping and the devil's dancing.
And tell us a little bit, too, now that you're into the narrative work, the process for at what point in the development of the work do you actually draw and paint on the surface?
So I would make the forms first, and I think these were pretty much influenced by Rudy Audio, too, the way that he built the forms and then painted the horses and the figures.
For those who don't know Rudy Audio, do you want to tell us where he was from?
He was from Montana, and it was his method of slab construction that led me to build the way that I did. And I think that the way he painted on the forms influenced the way I worked on these. But then I incorporated the cutting technique to reveal like a skeletal form.
And it's interesting because you're sort of merging the form of the object with the form of the image you're depicting on the object, making them sort of interact.
Yeah.
Okay, and these are from the same series?
The Falling Angels on the left was one of the biggest pieces I had done up to that point. Each of those pillow forms that are on the wall were about 3 feet square.
Were they very heavy?
Well, they're hollow, and I work pretty thin, so they weren't too heavy, but still, when you get that much clay on the wall, that's a lot of weight on the wall. I tell my students that you cannot wait for your inspiration. If you start getting dry, you have to go look for inspiration. So when I would need inspiration, I would go to the museums in Houston. My favorite was the Menil, and I think that's where I saw the German expressionist painter that influenced the Falling Angels wall piece. And then more about duality, like there's 2 angels on the shield on the left, and then see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. That triptych and about 5 other pieces were bought by Saks Fifth Avenue, and the piece on the left we sold through a gallery in Dallas, but the collector broke it, and he shows up in another piece later on.
Why this see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil?
It's still, I think that was at the beginning of the Gulf War.
Okay.
And so I was making more pieces that were dealing with my concern over why we were going to war.
Okay.
I didn't think I ever did any political art. I forgot about these.
Well, now we know we're actually participating in Political Art Month.
Where's Jean?
And now we're looking at the front and, no, are we looking at the front and back or two?
No, those are two different pieces.
Objects,
The piece on the left is
They're companions, right?
is directly about the Gulf War. And as I was watching the war on TV in my studio, I was looking through my art history book for inspiration and seeing the war images in the art history book and seeing how little our culture changes. So.
And what's the narrative going on your vessels there?
So there's the warriors, and then at the bottom there's the demons with open mouths looking up, and then the